"Stand back, peasant. The royal tournament is not for your kind." The guard's voice cut through the morning mist like a blade, drawing the attention of noblemen and their ladies who gathered near the great gates of Varghelm Castle. Alric stood motionless, the weight of his homemade sword hanging heavy at his side, his calloused hands gripping the leather-wrapped hilt with determination, despite the mockery that rained down upon him. "I've come to compete," Alric said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. At 19 summers, his frame was lean but strong from years at the forge, his face weathered by sun and wind rather than pampered in palace halls. Laughter erupted from the gathered nobles. A knight with a crimson plume on his helmet spat at Alric's feet, the glob of saliva landing inches from his worn leather boots. "Did you hear that? The blacksmith boy wants to cross swords with knights." The knight's companions roared with amusement, their fine cloaks billowing in the winter wind that swept across the courtyard. "Go back to your anvil, boy. Steel is for forging, not for wielding by your kind." Alric felt the weight of the silver amulet against his chest, hidden beneath his rough linen shirt. It was his only inheritance, given to him by the old healer woman who had raised him in the ruins of Caerwyn village. The amulet bore a strange insignia, a sleeping lion surrounded by thorns, that had always seemed oddly out of place among his humble possessions. "The tournament is open to all men of valor," Alric replied, recalling the proclamation he'd heard read in the village square. "It doesn't specify noble birth." The guard captain stepped forward, his hand resting threateningly on his sword hilt. "It doesn't need to. Some things are understood by those with proper breeding." His eyes narrowed. "Now be gone before I have you flogged for insolence." From atop the castle wall, a figure watched with interest. Lady Rowena, daughter of Lord Theodric, her golden hair catching the morning light. Unlike the others, she did not laugh but studied the peasant boy with curious eyes. "Edric," she called to her brother's squire who stood nearby. "Who is that young man?" "Just some commoner from the outskirts, my lady. They say he works the forge in Old Caerwyn." "Caerwyn?" Rowena's brow furrowed. "The village that burned during the Northern Rebellion?" "The very same, my lady. Few survived the massacre." Below, Alric turned away from the gates, his shoulders squared despite the humiliation. He had saved for months to craft his sword, working late into the night after his regular duties were complete. The blade was simple but true, balanced perfectly for his grip. He had dreamed of proving his worth, of showing that a man's character could not be measured by his birthright alone. As he walked back toward the village, the old healer's words echoed in his mind. "Some eyes see what the world wants to hide." She had never explained what she meant, though she had raised him with skills far beyond those expected of a blacksmith's apprentice, reading ancient texts, recognizing poisonous plants, even the fundamentals of swordplay taught in hushed lessons behind their modest hut. "You there, peasant boy?" Alric turned to find an elderly man leaning on a walking staff, his clothes fine but worn, his beard white with age. It was Master Oswin, the former weapons master of Varghelm, now retired to a small manor on the edge of the village. "I saw you at the gates," the old man said, his eyes sharp despite his years. "You carry that sword like you know how to use it." "My father taught me," Alric replied, the lie coming easily after years of practice. In truth, he had no memory of his real parents, only fragments of dreams. A woman's scream, the smell of smoke, strong arms carrying him through darkness. "Did he now?" Oswin's eyes twinkled with something like recognition. "And did your father also teach you to wear a royal amulet beneath your shirt?" Alric's hand instinctively flew to his chest, where the outline of the pendant was barely visible. "Come with me, boy," Oswin said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's more than one way to enter a tournament." That night, as nobles feasted in the great hall, tragedy struck. Sir Gareth, champion of the southern marches and favorite to win the king's favor, collapsed during the banquet, his face contorted in agony, foam flecking his lips. "Poison!" cried Lord Theodric, rising from his seat beside the king. "Guards, lock the doors!" Panic erupted in the hall. King Anselm, gray-haired and grief-worn since the loss of his infant son 17 years before, called for calm. "Bring the royal physician," he commanded, but the court doctor was 3 days' ride away, attending a birth in the western province. In the chaos, few noticed as Oswin slipped through a servant's entrance, Alric close behind. The old weapons master led him through winding corridors to the champion's chambers, where Sir Gareth lay gasping for breath, surrounded by helpless courtiers. "Stand aside," Oswin announced. I've brought someone who can help. Lord Theodric turned, his face flushing with rage at the sight of Alric. A peasant? You bring a blacksmith's boy to treat a knight of the realm? But Lady Rowena, kneeling beside the fallen champion, looked up with desperate eyes. Father, please! Sir Gareth is dying! Alric stepped forward, removing his worn leather pouch. Inside were herbs gathered from the forest edge, preparations taught to him by the old healer. With steady hands, he crushed leaves of wolfsbane and mixed them with clear liquid from a small vial. The poison is in his ribs, Alric said with calm authority that surprised even himself. If we don't press sage to it now, he won't see the dawn. As he worked, the nobles watched in stunned silence. Alric moved with precision, his hands no longer those of a blacksmith, but of a healer trained in arts beyond his apparent station. When he finally looked up, Sir Gareth's breathing had steadied, his color returning. How did you know? Lady Rowena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alric met her gaze, and for a moment, something passed between them. Recognition perhaps of souls out of place in the world they inhabited. I simply observe, he answered, and I learn more from silence than from shouts. Outside the chamber window, the first snow of winter began to fall on Varghelm, covering the kingdom in white as old secrets stirred beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed. Dawn broke over Varghelm Castle, its towers gilded with winter sunlight. In the chamber where Sir Gareth had lain dying, the knight now slept peacefully, his breathing steady and strong. Alric had remained through the night, changing poultices and monitoring the poison's retreat from the knight's body. Exhaustion weighed on his shoulders, but satisfaction warmed his heart. A life had been saved by his hands. You should have been a physician, not a blacksmith, said a soft voice behind him. Alric turned to find Lady Rowena standing in the doorway, her simple morning gown replacing the finery of the previous night. Despite the early hour, she carried herself with quiet dignity. My place was decided for me at birth, my lady, Alric replied, wiping his hands on a cloth. As was yours. Rowena approached, studying him with curious eyes. You speak strangely for a commoner. Your words carry the weight of education. Before Alric could answer, the chamber door burst open. Lord Theodric entered, followed by 2 guards and Master Oswin. The old weapons master's face was grim. You've done well, boy, Lord Theodric said grudgingly. Sir Gareth owes you his life. His eyes narrowed. But that doesn't explain how a blacksmith's apprentice knows court medicine better than my own physicians. I was raised by a healer, my lord, Alric answered, keeping his gaze respectfully lowered. She taught me to recognize poisons and their remedies. A convenient skill, Lord Theodric said coldly, especially for one who might wish to demonstrate his worth by first administering the poison, then heroically providing the cure. Gasps echoed through the room. Rowena stepped forward. Father, you cannot possibly suggest— Silence, daughter! Theodric's hand cut through the air. Guards, search him. Rough hands seized Alric before he could protest. They tore open his simple tunic, revealing the silver amulet that hung around his neck. The room fell silent as the emblem caught the morning light, a sleeping lion surrounded by thorns. Lord Theodric's face drained of color. Where did you get that? He demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. It was given to me by the woman who raised me, Alric replied, lifting his chin. My only inheritance. Master Oswin stepped forward, his weathered hand reaching for the amulet. May I? He asked, his voice gentle. Alric nodded, and the old man turned the silver disc over, revealing an inscription on its back. Ad lucem veritas. The truth will come to light, Oswin translated, looking up at Lord Theodric with meaningful eyes. Take him to the holding cells, Lord Theodric commanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. And summon the king. He will want to see this curiosity. As the guards led Alric away, he caught a final glimpse of Rowena's face, confused, concerned, and somehow hopeful all at once. The holding cell was cold, its stone walls slick with winter damp. Alric sat on the simple wooden bench, turning the amulet over in his hands. For 19 years it had been his most treasured possession, yet he had never understood its significance. The sleeping lion had always seemed to be waiting, gathering strength for some future awakening. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. The cell door creaked open to reveal King Anselm himself, his tall frame stooped with age and grief, his crown sitting heavily upon his gray head. Leave us, the king commanded his guards. When they hesitated, he added firmly, Now. Alone with the prisoner, King Anselm studied Alric with eyes that seemed to search for something long lost. "They tell me you saved Sir Gareth with remarkable skill. I only did what I was taught, Your Majesty. And they tell me you wear an amulet." The king's voice wavered slightly. "May I see it?" Alric removed the chain from around his neck and handed the amulet to the king. Anselm's hands trembled as he held it, his thumb tracing the sleeping lion. 17 years ago, the king began, his voice distant with memory. "My wife, Queen Elspeth, gave birth to our second son during a terrible storm. The court celebrated for 7 days." His eyes clouded. "On the 8th day, our enemies from the north attacked the village of Caerwyn, where the royal nursery had been established away from the castle plague." Anselm's fingers tightened around the amulet. "The village was burned to the ground. My wife was visiting our son that night. Neither survived the attack." His voice broke. "My son's body was never found, though we searched the ashes for days." Alric's heart pounded in his chest. "And the amulet, Your Majesty, a royal birthright, given to each prince of Varghelm upon his naming day." The king turned the amulet over. "Ad lucem veritas. My wife chose the inscription herself." His eyes rose to meet Alric's. She believed that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would eventually come to light. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities. "The woman who raised me," Alric said finally, "never spoke of how she found me. She lived at the edge of the burned village, gathering herbs in the forest. She told me only that I came to her on the night of fire." King Anselm reached out a hesitant hand, his fingers brushing Alric's cheek as if touching a ghost. "You have her eyes," he whispered. "Elspeth's eyes." The cell door opened again, this time admitting Lord Theodric, whose face darkened at the intimate scene before him. "Your Majesty, this is most irregular. This boy could be an impostor, a spy sent to—" "Enough, Theodric." The king's voice regained its strength. "I would know my own blood." "Blood can be claimed by any clever pretender," Theodric countered. "If he is truly the lost prince, let him prove his worth." "And how would you have him do that?" the king demanded. A cold smile spread across Theodric's face. "The tournament continues tomorrow. Let him compete against Sir Baldric, my champion. If he is truly of royal blood, surely he possesses the natural skill of his lineage. He is untrained." Oswin protested from the doorway where he had been listening. "Sir Baldric has killed 12 men in combat. Then perhaps the boy should return to his forge," Theodric suggested silkily, "unless he fears to defend his extraordinary claims." Alric stood, drawing himself to his full height. Though dressed in simple clothes, something in his bearing had changed, a shadow of majesty awakening within him. "I will fight," he said quietly. The king turned to him, concern etched in the lines of his face. "You don't have to do this." "I do, Your Majesty." Alric's eyes met the king's. "Not to prove who I am, but to discover it for myself." That night, in a small chamber adjacent to the royal apartments, Oswin presented Alric with a sword, not the simple blade he had forged himself, but an ancient weapon with a golden hilt and runes etched along its length. "This was your grandfather's sword," the old weapons master explained. "I've kept it safe these many years, hoping—" Alric wrapped his hand around the hilt. The sword felt like an extension of his arm, perfectly balanced, as if made for him alone. "I can teach you a few techniques before dawn," Oswin offered. "Tricks that might save your life against Baldric." Alric nodded, his face set with determination. Outside the window, snow continued to fall on Varghelm, covering the past in white, while in the shadows of the castle, Lord Theodric whispered instructions to his champion. "Kill him," Theodric ordered, pressing a purse of gold into Sir Baldric's hand. "Make it look like a fair combat, but ensure he doesn't leave the field alive." "And if he truly is the lost prince?" Baldric asked. Theodric's eyes hardened. "There is no lost prince, only a clever impostor who threatens everything we've built in his absence." He gripped the knight's shoulder. "Tomorrow, Varghelm's future will be decided in blood." Morning arrived with the clamor of preparation. The tournament grounds hummed with activity, as servants erected colorful banners bearing the crests of noble houses. Spectators from every corner of Varghelm gathered, drawn by rumors that swept through the kingdom like wildfire. A blacksmith's apprentice claimed to be the lost prince, and today, he would face Sir Baldric in combat. In the small chamber where he had spent the night, Alric stood motionless as two royal squires fastened unfamiliar armor to his body. The metal plates felt foreign against his skin, heavier than the leather apron he wore at the forge, yet somehow right, as if his body remembered what his mind could not. "The armor belonged to your father when he was your age," Oswin explained, supervising the squire's work. "We had to make some adjustments, but it should serve." Alric gazed at his reflection in the polished shield propped against the wall. A stranger looked back at him, not the blacksmith's boy from Caerwyn, but a young knight with proud bearing and solemn eyes. "I spent all night trying to remember," Alric said softly, "trying to recall my mother's face, the royal nursery, anything from before the fire. But there's nothing." Oswin placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Memory lives in more than the mind, my boy. Sometimes it dwells in the blood, in the way a hand grips a sword, or in how the heart responds to duty." A knock at the door announced Lady Rowena. She entered with downcast eyes, a blue ribbon clutched in her hands. "My lady," Alric bowed awkwardly in the unfamiliar armor. "I've come to offer you my favor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Though my father would be furious if he knew." She stepped forward, tying the ribbon around his right arm, her fingers lingering on the polished metal. "Sir Baldric is dangerous," she warned. "He fights without honor when my father commands it." "And does your father command it today?" Alric asked. Rowena's eyes met his, filled with conflict. "My father has been Lord Protector of Varghelm since the Queen's death and the Prince's disappearance. If you are who they say." She couldn't finish the thought. "I don't know who I am," Alric admitted. "I only know what feels true." The trumpet sounded, calling the combatants to the field. Oswin handed Alric his grandfather's sword and the helmet that would complete his transformation. "Remember what I taught you," the old weapons master said. "Baldric attacks with fury but leaves his left side exposed after his third strike. Watch for it." Alric nodded, his throat too tight for words. As he stepped from the chamber into the corridor, he found King Anselm waiting, his royal mantle draped over bent shoulders. "Your Majesty," Alric began, but the king raised a hand to silence him. "I should never have allowed this," Anselm said, his voice heavy with regret. "A king protects his son. He does not send him to battle untrained." "I chose this fight," Alric reminded him, "because Theodric left you no choice." The king's eyes clouded. "He was my most trusted advisor once, brother to my beloved Elspeth. But grief and power have twisted him." He gripped Alric's armored forearm. "Whatever happens today, know that I believe. Even without proof, even without memory, I see my Elspeth in your eyes, and my father in your bearing." Alric swallowed hard, nodding once before donning his helmet. Together, they walked toward the tournament grounds, toward judgment by steel and blood. The arena erupted in murmurs as Alric entered. Commoners who had known him as the blacksmith's apprentice pointed and whispered. Nobles who had mocked him now studied him with uncertain eyes, seeking resemblance to their king in his armored form. Across the field, Sir Baldric waited, his massive frame encased in black armor adorned with crimson accents. His helmet was fashioned in the likeness of a snarling wolf, and his shield bore the marks of countless victories. Lord Theodric stood from his place beside the royal box. "Today we witness a trial by combat," he announced, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Sir Baldric, champion of Varghelm, against a blacksmith who claims royal blood." Titters of laughter rippled through the noble section. Theodric continued, "Should this pretender survive, we shall consider his claim with appropriate skepticism. Should he fall," he let the implication hang in the air. King Anselm rose slowly. "Should he emerge victorious," he declared, his voice stronger than it had been in years, "I will acknowledge him as Alric Anselm Varghelm, second son of the royal house, brother to Crown Prince Edric, and rightful prince of the realm." Gasps and exclamations swept through the crowd. Prince Edric, seated beside his father, gripped the arms of his chair, his face a mask of shock and suspicion. "Let the combat begin," Theodric called, sitting down abruptly. Sir Baldric advanced immediately, his greatsword cleaving the air with frightening speed. Alric barely raised his shield in time, the impact driving him backward, sending shockwaves through his arm and shoulder. "First blood from the impostor," someone called from the crowd as Baldric pressed forward, each blow more vicious than the last. Alric retreated, remembering Oswin's lessons from the night before. "Let him exhaust himself against your shield," the old master had advised. "A man who fights with anger fights against himself as much as his opponent." 3 powerful strikes rained down upon Alric's shield, denting the metal and numbing his arm. Then, just as Oswin had predicted, Baldric's left side opened as he drew back for a killing blow. Alric moved without thinking, his body responding with grace that belied his lack of training. He spun inside Baldric's guard, his grandfather's sword flashing in the winter sunlight. The crowd gasped as his blade found the gap between Baldric's breastplate and shoulder guard, drawing first blood. Baldric roared in pain and fury, redoubling his assault. The two men circled each other, steel meeting steel in a deadly dance. With each exchange, Alric felt something awakening within him. Not memory exactly, but instinct, as if his body remembered lessons his mind had forgotten. "Fight like your father," Oswin had told him. King Anselm was never the strongest, but he was the smartest swordsman in the kingdom. He studied his opponents, found their patterns, and struck when they least expected it. Alric watched Baldric's movements, recognizing the rhythm of his attacks. The knight favored his right side, always returning to the same stance after a flurry of blows. When Baldric launched another furious assault, Alric waited, endured, and then countered with precision that shocked the onlookers. His blade sliced across Baldric's thigh, finding another gap in the black armor. The knight stumbled, blood seeping through the wound, his breathing ragged inside the wolf helmet. "Yield," Alric called, giving his opponent a chance to surrender with honor. "Never to a peasant," Baldric spat, charging forward with renewed hatred. This time, something shifted in the combat. Baldric's attacks grew desperate, dishonorable. He kicked sand toward Alric's helmet, attempted to trip him with an extended foot, and even reached for a hidden dagger when their swords locked together. The crowd began to murmur in disapproval. Even among nobles who doubted Alric's claim, such tactics were beneath the dignity of a true knight. "Fight with honor, Baldric," someone called from the stands. The knight responded by landing a mailed fist against Alric's helmet, dazing him momentarily. As Alric staggered, Baldric raised his sword for a killing blow. "Now you die, pretender," he growled. In that suspended moment, as the blade descended toward his unprotected neck, Alric's world narrowed to a single point of clarity. Time seemed to slow. He saw the blade's path, saw Baldric's weight shift forward, saw the opening that would be created. Without conscious thought, Alric dropped to one knee, pivoted, and thrust upward with his grandfather's sword. The ancient blade slid between the plates of Baldric's armor, finding the vulnerable space beneath his arm. The knight froze, his own sword hanging useless in midair, his body suddenly rigid with shock. Silence fell over the arena as Baldric dropped to his knees, his sword falling from nerveless fingers. Alric withdrew his blade and stepped back, offering his fallen opponent dignity in defeat. "I yield," Baldric gasped, removing his wolf helmet to reveal a face contorted with pain and humiliation. "The victory is yours." The crowd erupted, commoners cheering wildly while nobles watched in stunned silence. King Anselm stood, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered cheeks. Beside him, Prince Edric remained seated, his expression unreadable. Lord Theodric's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "This proves nothing," he shouted, but his voice was lost in the crowd's celebration. Alric removed his helmet, his face glistening with sweat, a small cut on his cheek where Baldric's gauntlet had caught him. He looked not to the king or the nobles, but to the commoners who had known him all his life. The baker who had bought his horseshoes, the farmer whose plow he had mended, the children who had watched him work the forge with fascination. "I stand before you as I have always been," he called to them. "A man of Caerwyn, raised in labor and honest toil." He turned toward the royal box, kneeling with his grandfather's bloodied sword extended before him. "If I am more than this, if royal blood flows through my veins, then I pledge that blood to the service of all Varghelm, not just those born to privilege." The crowd's roar became deafening. King Anselm descended from the royal box, moving with a vigor he had not shown in years. He approached Alric, lifting him to his feet not as a subject, but as a son. "The truth has come to light," the king declared, his voice breaking with emotion. "Behold, Alric Anselm Varghelm, second son of the royal house, returned to us at last." As the king embraced him before the kingdom, Alric caught sight of Lord Theodric's face, no longer purple with rage, but pale with calculation, his eyes cold with unfinished schemes. Behind him, Prince Edric watched the celebration with a troubled gaze, his hand tightening around the hilt of his ceremonial sword. The lost prince had been found, but the battle for Varghelm had only just begun. Night fell over Varghelm Castle, its stone walls aglow with torchlight as the kingdom celebrated the return of its lost prince. The great hall echoed with music and laughter. Nobles and servants alike swept up in the extraordinary tale. A blacksmith's apprentice revealed as royal blood, victorious in combat against one of the realm's greatest knights. Yet in a quiet antechamber away from the festivities, Alric stood alone, gazing out a narrow window at the village lights below. He had exchanged his armor for princely garments, a deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread, black leather breeches, and a cloak lined with fur. The clothes fit his frame well enough, but he felt as though he wore another man's skin. "Do they not suit you, brother?" Alric turned to find Prince Edric in the doorway, a goblet of wine in his hand. At 25, the crown prince was everything Alric was not: polished, confident, born and raised in the certainty of his position. The resemblance between them was subtle but undeniable. The same set of the jaw, the same arch of the brow. "They're finer than anything I've worn," Alric answered honestly. "I fear I'll soil them with forge smoke that never quite leaves my hands." Edric approached, studying him with unreadable eyes. "Father has spoken of nothing but you since the combat. Alric moves like I did in my youth," he says. Alric has Elspeth's kindness in his eyes. There was an edge to Edric's voice that made Alric wary. "I've taken nothing from you," he said quietly. "Haven't you?" Edric circled him slowly. "For 17 years, I've been the sole heir, the only son. I've carried the weight of the kingdom's future alone. And now, a stranger appears with my mother's amulet and my grandfather's sword skill, and suddenly half the court whispers that he might make a finer king than I. I've made no claim to your throne," Alric protested. "Not yet." Edric's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But Uncle Theodric believes you will. He thinks you're an impostor, planted by our enemies to divide the royal house." "And what do you believe?" Edric paused, swirling the wine in his goblet. "I believe that you believe. Whether that makes you my brother or merely a deluded blacksmith remains to be seen." He placed his untouched wine on a small table. "Come, Father has called a council, and both princes must attend." The council chamber was an austere room dominated by a massive oak table. When Alric entered behind Edric, several figures were already seated. King Anselm at the head, Lord Theodric to his right, Master Oswin, the royal chancellor, and two elderly men Alric didn't recognize. "Ah, my sons," the king said, the words sending a strange thrill through Alric's chest. "Please, join us." As Alric took his seat, he noticed Lady Rowena standing in the shadows behind her father's chair. She offered him a small smile, the blue ribbon now woven into her golden braid. "I've summoned this council to address matters of succession," King Anselm began. "With Alric's return, we must formalize his position within the royal house." "If I may, Your Majesty," Lord Theodric interrupted, "there are still questions regarding this remarkable claim." "He bears the royal amulet," Oswin countered. "He wields his grandfather's sword with inherited skill. Trinkets can be stolen," Theodric dismissed, "and skill with a blade proves nothing of bloodline." One of the elderly men cleared his throat. "Perhaps I might offer a solution, Your Majesty." He was thin as a reed, with parchment-like skin and sharp eyes. "I am Magister Leoric, keeper of the royal archives. There exists a test, an ancient rite of the Varghelm bloodline." The king leaned forward with interest. "What test is this?" "The trials of three truths, Your Majesty." The Magister's voice carried the dust of ancient tomes. "When the first king of Varghelm united the warring tribes, he established a way to confirm royal lineage beyond doubt. 3 tests, of blood, of wisdom, and of spirit. These trials haven't been performed in generations," the royal chancellor objected. "Because they haven't been needed," Leoric replied. "But they remain valid under our oldest laws." Lord Theodric's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. "And what do these trials entail?" "The trial of blood requires the claimant to open the ancestral vault, which responds only to Varghelm blood," Leoric explained. "The trial of wisdom poses 3 riddles from the kingdom's founding texts. And the trial of spirit." He hesitated. "The trial of spirit requires the claimant to spend a night in vigil in the ancient crypt, facing whatever comes." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "I'll do it," Alric said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "If this will remove doubt and bring peace to the kingdom, I'll undertake these trials." King Anselm shook his head. "This is unnecessary. I recognize you as my son." "With respect, Father," Edric said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. "The kingdom requires certainty. If Alric is truly my brother, let him prove it beyond any question." The king studied his elder son's face, then sighed heavily. "When could these trials begin, Magister?" "The vault has already been prepared, Your Majesty. We could commence at dawn tomorrow." "Then it is decided," the king declared. "Alric will face the trials of 3 truths, and all of Varghelm will witness the outcome." As the council dispersed, Rowena approached Alric, her face tight with concern. "These trials are dangerous," she whispered, "especially the trial of spirit. Men have been driven mad in those crypts." "I've faced uncertainty all my life," Alric replied. "At least now I face it with purpose." "Be careful of my father," she warned, glancing toward Lord Theodric's retreating back. "He won't accept you easily, no matter what the trials reveal." "And you, my lady? What would convince you of my lineage?" Rowena studied his face in the flickering torchlight. "Perhaps I'm already convinced," she admitted. "There's something in the way you carry yourself, not learned from noble tutors but born in the blood. Something that speaks of kingship." Before Alric could respond, a servant appeared to escort him to his new chambers. Not the small room where he had donned armor that morning, but a suite of rooms befitting a prince of the realm. As he followed the servant through torchlit corridors, Alric felt the weight of the castle pressing down upon him, its ancient stones witnessing yet another turn in the long history of House Varghelm. In his opulent bedchamber, he found Master Oswin waiting, the old weapons master looking out of place among the rich furnishings. "You should have told me about the trials," Alric said, removing his cloak. "I didn't know Leoric would propose them," Oswin replied. "They belong to the old ways before my time at court. Will they truly prove my bloodline?" Oswin's weathered face grew solemn. "The ancestral vault has never been opened by anyone not of Varghelm blood. As for the riddles, they test not just knowledge but understanding of the kingdom's founding principles, and the trial of spirit." He hesitated. "What happens in the crypt?" Alric pressed. "No one knows exactly. Those who succeed emerge changed, but stronger. Those who fail," the old man shook his head. "There haven't been failures in recorded history, but legends speak of men who entered the crypt and were never seen again." Alric sat heavily on the edge of the ornate bed. "Theodric hopes I'll fail." "Undoubtedly. Just as he hoped Baldric would kill you in the arena." "And Edric? Where does he stand?" Oswin stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The crown prince is more complex than his uncle. Edric is neither cruel nor power-hungry, but he has been raised as sole heir, sole hope of the kingdom. Your appearance threatens everything he's been taught about his destiny." A knock at the door interrupted them. A servant entered, bowing low. "Prince Alric, the king requests your presence in his private chambers." Alric found King Anselm seated before a roaring fire, looking older than he had in the council chamber. The flickering flames cast deep shadows across his lined face. "You don't have to do this," the king said without preamble. "I can overrule the council." "And confirm their suspicions that I'm an impostor granted favor through your grief?" Alric shook his head. "I must prove myself to the kingdom and to myself." The king gestured to a chair opposite his own. "Sit with me a while, my son." Alric sat, still unused to such familiarity with the monarch. "Tell me of your life in Caerwyn," Anselm requested. "Tell me of the woman who raised you." For the next hour, Alric spoke of his humble upbringing, the small cottage at the forest's edge, the old healer woman with her quiet wisdom and mysterious past, his apprenticeship to the village blacksmith. He described the simple joys of country life and the yearning that had always pulled at him, the sense that he belonged somewhere else. "She never told me I was anything but an orphan," Alric concluded. "Yet she educated me far beyond what a blacksmith would need. History, heraldry, even the rudiments of statecraft disguised as village tales. She protected you," the king said softly, "kept you hidden while preparing you for who you might become." He reached into a drawer beside him and withdrew a small portrait in a golden frame. "This was your mother." Alric took the portrait with trembling hands. Queen Elspeth gazed back at him with eyes startlingly like his own, intelligent, kind, with a hint of stubbornness in their depths. "I see her in you," the king whispered. "When you stood victorious in the arena today, you had her same expression, fierce, yet compassionate, unwilling to humiliate your defeated foe." Alric stared at the portrait, searching for memories that wouldn't come. "I wish I could remember her." "You were only 2 years old when she died," the king said, his voice thick with emotion. "Too young to form lasting memories, yet old enough to be marked by her loss," Alric replied. The king nodded slowly. "We are all marked by those we lose." He rose stiffly from his chair. "You should rest. The trials begin at dawn." As Alric turned to leave, the king called after him. "Whatever the outcome tomorrow, know this. You have already brought light back to a kingdom long shadowed by grief. For that alone, I thank you." Later, as Alric lay in a bed too soft for comfort, sleep eluded him. Outside his window, the moon cast silver light across the kingdom that might be his birthright. In the distance, he could see the glow of forge fires in the village where he had spent his life, so close yet suddenly unreachable. A soft scratching at his door roused him from his thoughts. Cautiously, he opened it to find the corridor empty, save for a small rolled parchment on the floor. Unrolling it by candlelight, he read a message written in a hasty hand. "Beware the trial of spirit. The crypt holds more than ancestral bones. Trust no vision that asks you to surrender what you hold most dear." Alric reread Rowena's warning, her blue ribbon now wrapped around the parchment. Whatever awaited him in the ancient crypt, at least one person in the castle besides the king seemed to wish him success. As he tucked the warning beneath his pillow, a shadow moved across his balcony. Just a trick of moonlight through swaying branches, or something more sinister. Alric closed his eyes, knowing that with dawn would come the first of 3 trials that would either confirm him as Prince of Varghelm or expose him as the blacksmith he had always believed himself to be. Dawn arrived with solemn ceremony. The castle bells tolled 7 times as Alric was led through silent corridors by an honor guard of 6 knights. He wore a simple white tunic bearing the sleeping lion emblem of House Varghelm, his feet bare against the cold stone floors as tradition demanded. Around his neck hung the silver amulet, polished to gleaming brightness for this momentous day. The ancestral vault lay deep beneath the castle, accessible only through a spiraling staircase that descended into darkness. Torchlight cast eerie shadows as Alric followed Magister Leoric downward, each step taking him further from the world he had known, and deeper into the mysteries of his possible heritage. At the bottom of the staircase waited a gathering of witnesses. King Anselm, looking sleepless and anxious. Prince Edric, his expression carefully neutral. Lord Theodric, barely concealing his anticipation of failure. Lady Rowena, her face pale with concern, and Master Oswin, whose encouraging nod steadied Alric's resolve. "We stand before the ancestral vault of House Varghelm," Magister Leoric announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Unopened for a generation, sealed by magic as old as the kingdom itself." Before them loomed a massive door of black iron, its surface etched with the histories of Varghelm's rulers. At its center was a small depression in the shape of a hand. "The trial of blood begins," Leoric declared. "Only one of true Varghelm lineage may open this vault. Place your hand upon the door, Prince Alric, and we shall know the truth." Alric approached the ancient door, keenly aware of the eyes upon him. The metal gleamed coldly in the torchlight, its surface radiating an unnatural chill. As he raised his hand to the depression, Lord Theodric stepped forward. "A moment," he said. "To ensure there is no deception, the claimant's hand should be examined." Though clearly displeased, the king nodded his assent. A court physician approached, turning Alric's palm upward to inspect it before the assembled witnesses. "No cuts, no blood already drawn," the physician confirmed. "Proceed," the king commanded. Alric placed his hand into the depression. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then pain lanced through his palm as an unseen mechanism pricked his flesh, drawing blood. The crimson liquid flowed into hidden channels within the door, tracing the outlines of the engraved histories. The silence in the chamber was absolute, all eyes fixed on the door as Alric's blood made its journey through the ancient mechanism. When it reached the center of the door, where the Varghelm crest was prominently displayed, the blood pooled for a moment before being absorbed completely into the metal. A deep rumbling shook the chamber. Slowly, ponderously, the massive door began to swing inward. "The vault accepts him," Leoric announced, awe evident in his voice. "The trial of blood is past." Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. King Anselm's eyes shone with vindication, while Lord Theodric's face darkened with thwarted expectation. "The trial of wisdom awaits," Leoric continued, gesturing toward the open vault. Inside, the ancestral vault was a treasure chamber beyond imagination. Gold and jewels from centuries of rule, ancient weapons, armor of legendary heroes, and scrolls containing the kingdom's most closely guarded secrets. At its center stood a stone plinth bearing 3 sealed scrolls. "3 riddles from our founding days," Leoric explained. "Answer them correctly, and the second trial is past. Alric approached the plinth, conscious of the witnesses following at a respectful distance. He broke the seal on the first scroll and read aloud, "I am the crown that cannot be worn, the throne that cannot be sat upon, the scepter that cannot be held, yet no king rules without me. What am I?" The chamber fell silent as Alric considered the riddle. In his mind, he heard the old healer woman's voice, reciting village wisdom that now revealed itself as disguised royal teaching. A true leader's strength comes not from symbols, but from the hearts of those who follow. The answer is trust, Alric declared. The trust of the people in their ruler, and the ruler in his people. The scroll in his hands glowed briefly before turning to ash that scattered across the stone floor. Leoric nodded, impressed. The first riddle is answered. Proceed to the second. Alric broke the seal on the second scroll. I divide what should be united, unite what should be divided. Kings who worship me fall, while those who defy me stand eternal. What am I? This riddle seemed more challenging, but as Alric pondered, he recalled the history lessons disguised as bedtime stories, tales of kings who separated themselves from common folk and paid the price, of rulers who broke down barriers and forged lasting legacies. The answer is prejudice, he said finally. It divides people who should stand together and unites them in hatred rather than brotherhood. Again, the scroll glowed and turned to ash. Leoric's eyebrows rose higher, and even Edric looked impressed despite himself. The third scroll contained the final riddle. What grows sharper with use yet cuts deepest when dull, serves the throne best when freely given rather than taken, and weighs nothing but can break a kingdom. This one gave Alric pause. He closed his eyes, searching his memories for guidance. The answer came not from the healer's lessons, but from his own experiences at the forge, watching metal transform under his hands, learning when to press and when to yield. The answer is judgment, he said. A ruler's judgment grows sharper with experience, yet causes the most harm when dull or hasty. It serves best when accepted willingly by the people, rather than forced upon them. And poor judgment, though intangible, can destroy even the mightiest kingdom. The third scroll flared brightly before disintegrating. Around the chamber, even the most skeptical witnesses looked at Alric with new respect. The trial of wisdom is past, Leoric announced. 2 trials completed, 1 remains. King Anselm approached Alric, pride evident in his bearing. You have already proven yourself beyond question, he said quietly. There is no need for the final trial. There is every need, Lord Theodric countered. The law requires all 3 trials. I will complete what I've begun, Alric insisted, meeting the king's concerned gaze. For the kingdom's sake, and for my own. As twilight descended on Varghelm, Alric was led to the ancient crypt beneath the castle's oldest tower. Unlike the grand royal mausoleum where recent monarchs lay in state, this crypt predated the kingdom itself, a circular chamber hewn from living rock, its walls lined with niches containing the remains of the earliest Varghelm rulers. The trial of spirit requires you to spend the night in vigil, Leoric explained at the crypt's entrance. What happens within is known only to those who have faced it. You will enter unarmed, carrying only a single torch. If you emerge at dawn, the trial is past. And if I don't emerge? Alric asked. The magister's face was grave. Then the kingdom will mourn a prince twice lost. Before Alric could enter, Rowena stepped forward, pressing something into his hand, a small pouch of herbs. For courage, she whispered. My father must not see this. Prince Edric approached next, surprising everyone. Whatever awaits you in there, he said, his voice pitched for Alric's ears alone. Remember that a true Varghelm faces fear with clear eyes. It wasn't quite encouragement, but neither was it hostility. King Anselm embraced him. Return to us, my son. Alric entered the crypt alone, the heavy door closing behind him with finality. His torch illuminated a space both smaller and more imposing than he had imagined. A perfect circle of stone, its domed ceiling lost in shadow, its floor inlaid with a mosaic depicting the founding of Varghelm. He placed his torch in a central holder and sat cross-legged on the cold stone, facing the niche that contained the first king's remains. Hours passed in silence. Midnight came and went, marked only by the slow burning of his torch. Then as the flame began to gutter, the air in the crypt grew colder. Shadows deepened, moving independently of the failing light. Alric felt a presence surrounding him, not malevolent, but intensely questioning. A voice that was not quite sound, but rather thought pressed directly into his mind. "Why have you come, blood of my blood?" "To prove my lineage," Alric answered aloud, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Lineage?" The presence seemed to circle him. "What is lineage but an accident of birth? What claim does it give you?" "It gives me a place," Alric replied. "A belonging I've never known." The shadows congealed before him, taking the shape of a crowned figure with features that shifted between stern and kind, young and old. The faces of all Varghelm rulers blended into one. "And what would you sacrifice for this belonging?" the figure asked. "Would you surrender the life you've known, the skills of your hands, the freedom to choose your own path?" Alric considered the question carefully, remembering Rowena's warning. "Trust no vision that asks you to surrender what you hold most dear." "I would not surrender who I am," he answered finally. "If royal blood flows in my veins, it flowed there when I worked the forge and slept in a cottage. The crown may change my circumstances, but it cannot change my essence without my consent." The figure seemed to grow more solid. "And if the kingdom demanded you become something other than what you are, then I would fail the kingdom," Alric said firmly. "A ruler who abandons his true self for power becomes a hollow crown, an empty throne." The shadowy presence expanded, filling the crypt with swirling darkness that extinguished his torch completely. In the perfect blackness, Alric felt rather than saw the approach of multiple presences, the spirits of ancestors testing his resolve. Images flooded his mind. Varghelm besieged by enemies, his brother Edric falling in battle, Lord Theodric seizing power in the chaos, the kingdom fracturing under civil war. He saw himself turning away, returning to his simple life as the realm collapsed. "This is not vision, but temptation," he declared to the darkness. "You show me calamity to make me doubt my choice." The images shifted. Now he saw himself crowned, but changed, growing cruel and distant, executing Lord Theodric publicly, exiling his brother, ruling with an iron fist that crushed dissent. The people who had once cheered him now trembled at his approach. "Nor will I become a tyrant to prevent tyranny," Alric stated, rising to his feet in the darkness. "Power reveals. It does not transform. If I am cruel with a crown, I was always cruel without it." A third vision formed, himself as he was, standing between nobles and commoners, one hand extended to each, building bridges where walls had stood for generations. He saw Edric beside him, their differences transformed into strength. He saw Rowena, not as a nobleman's daughter, but as a partner in creating a new Varghelm. "This path I would choose," Alric acknowledged. "Not because it is easy, but because it honors both what I was and what I might become." The darkness receded slowly, revealing the crypt once more. But the niches that had held ancestral remains now glowed with soft light, illuminating the chamber. Before him stood not a shadow but a man of flesh and blood, or the perfect semblance of one, wearing the crown of the first king. "You have answered well, Alric of Varghelm," the figure said, now speaking with a physical voice that echoed in the chamber. "Not with rehearsed wisdom or desperate pleading, but with the truth of your heart." "Who are you?" Alric asked, though some part of him already knew. "I am the first of our line, the founder of what you would now reclaim." The figure approached, his form becoming more solid with each step. "Every true heir of Varghelm must face me, must prove worthy not just in blood or mind, but in spirit." "And have I proved worthy?" Alric asked. The founder smiled. "You have proven yourself more worthy than many who came before you. You understand what too many forget, that nobility comes not from birth, but from choice, not from power, but from how that power is wielded." He reached out, placing a hand upon Alric's brow. "Carry this understanding with you, son of my lineage. Let it guide you in the days to come." A warmth spread from the founder's touch, filling Alric with certainty and peace. The ancestral presence faded gradually, leaving behind a single object on the crypt floor, a simple iron ring bearing the sleeping lion of Varghelm. Alric picked up the ring, sliding it onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for his hand alone. As he did so, the first light of dawn filtered through a hidden aperture in the crypt's ceiling, falling directly upon the spot where he stood. The trial of spirit was past. When the crypt door opened at sunrise, King Anselm, Prince Edric, and the other witnesses found Alric standing tall, the iron ring gleaming on his finger, his face bearing the serene expression of one who has looked into the depths of himself and found truth. "The trials are complete," Magister Leoric announced. "Blood, wisdom, and spirit have confirmed what the king's heart already knew. Before us stands Alric Anselm Varghelm, true prince of the realm." King Anselm embraced his son, tears flowing freely down his weathered cheeks. Prince Edric approached cautiously, studying his newly confirmed brother with complex emotions playing across his face. "It seems I have a brother after all," he said finally, extending his hand. "Varghelm has two princes once more." Alric clasped Edric's hand firmly. Two princes who might achieve together what neither could alone. Only Lord Theodric remained apart, his face a mask of barely contained fury. With the trials complete and witnessed by the kingdom's highest authorities, his path to power had been decisively blocked. He bowed stiffly and departed without speaking, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. "He will not accept this easily," Rowena warned, approaching Alric as the group made its way back to the upper levels of the castle. "My father plots even now." "Then we must give him no shadow to hide within," Alric replied. "The kingdom must be united, not just in name, but in truth." 1 week later, the people of Varghelm gathered in the castle's great courtyard to witness a historic ceremony. Prince Alric knelt before his father, no longer dressed in borrowed finery, but in a tunic of his own design, blue like his royal heritage, but trimmed with the leather and iron of his blacksmith's past. "Rise, Prince Alric of Varghelm," King Anselm proclaimed, placing a simple circlet upon his son's head. "Rise and take your place as royal envoy to the common folk, voice of those too long unheard in these halls." The crowd erupted in cheers as Alric rose. Beside the king stood Prince Edric, who had himself proposed this new role for his brother, a position that acknowledged Alric's royal blood while honoring his connection to the common people. From his place at the ceremony, Lord Theodric watched with cold calculation, his ambitions temporarily thwarted, but not abandoned. In the shadows of the kingdom, forces loyal to him still gathered, waiting for opportunity. But on this day, as winter sunlight bathed the ancient stones of Varghelm Castle, hope outshone intrigue. The lost prince had returned, bringing with him not just the completion of a broken family, but the promise of a kingdom where walls between high and low might finally begin to crumble. Lady Rowena stepped forward, presenting Alric with a shield bearing his personal crest, the sleeping lion of Varghelm, now awakened, with a blacksmith's hammer clutched in its paw. "No longer asleep," she said softly, for his ears alone. "No longer surrounded by thorns, but ready to forge a new path." Alric accepted the shield, raising it high for all to see. "I stand before you as I have always been," he called to the assembled kingdom, shaped by humble beginnings yet bound to royal duty. "I pledge to be a bridge between worlds too long divided, to remember always that true nobility lies not in birth but in action, not in blood, but in service." The people roared their approval, commoners and nobles alike united in this moment of transformation. Among them stood Master Oswin, pride shining in his aged eyes, and the old healer woman who had raised Alric, secretly brought to the castle to witness her foster son's ascension. As Alric looked out over the kingdom that was now undeniably his birthright, he felt the weight of the iron ring upon his finger. Not a burden, but a reminder of the promise he had made in the depths of the ancient crypt. A promise to honor both what he had been and what he might become, to forge a future worthy of all Varghelm's people. The sleeping lion had awakened at last. In the great forges of fate, even the humblest beginnings can be shaped into the most remarkable destinies. Through fire and shadow, through trial and revelation, the truth had indeed come to light. Not merely the truth of Alric's bloodline, but the deeper truth that every person, regardless of birth, carries within them the potential for greatness. The tale of the blacksmith prince spread throughout the land, inspiring commoners to look beyond their stations and nobles to recognize worth in unexpected places. It reminded all who heard it that true nobility is forged in the heart, tempered by challenge, and proven through compassion. If this story has kindled something within you, a recognition that worth lies not in titles but in character, then share it with others who may need its light. For in our kingdom of stories, every unexpected meeting can transform lives. Every gesture of kindness can rewrite destiny. Until our next journey together, remember that the greatest crowns are often invisible to all but those with eyes to truly see.